Recording in progress. Good morning,
Good morning, girl.
Miss Jamila. Do you want to introduce yourself?
I will introduce myself. So I'm so excited to be with you today, Kat. So I'm Jamila, Coach Jamila. I'm a total wellness coach. I have a business called Grace and Grit Coaching. I also work with Life Force as a health coach. I'm a mom of five. I'm an author. I'm a speaker. But I'm really, really excited to be having this conversation. Um, but yeah, that's a little bit about me. And as far as total wellness, I love focusing on everything holistically from mindset to sleep hygiene, stress management, nutrition, fitness. So that's a little bit about me. Tell me more and introduce yourself, Miss Cat, Miss Beautiful Cat.
I love that. And I still need to praise you for being a mom of five and still making time to prioritize your health and fitness. Like, I am so in awe of you.
Girl, day by day, day by
Day by
day.
day, hour by hour, sometimes, I would imagine.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
Well, we're similar in that we're both health coaches. I specialize in personal training. I have my own business and I work with the entire body. So that includes the mind and that includes all aspects of health, from stress management to getting enough quality sleep, nutrition, and of course, fitness. And then, in addition to all of that, I work as a model and I do commercials here in Los Angeles. And I love it. I find that these two industries are very complementary to each other.
Yes, I love it. And all your beautiful pictures pop up, by the way, of your fitness. Let me tell you, for y'all who are watching, she practices what she preaches. She's not just like, yes, I'm into fitness and doesn't do what she says. You can clearly see by her body. So I love that. You practice what you preach. That's amazing.
That is very sweet, and I appreciate you acknowledging me that in that. So thank you. But all right, are you ready to dive in?
I'm ready. I'm
Because I
ready.
feel like if we were given, you know, days and days and days, we'd be able to fill it up with all sorts of conversation. And so I love that we chose a topic on intermittent fasting, which was
Yeah.
your idea and which is a super hot topic in the health and fitness world
Yeah.
because I know that I've definitely experimented with it and I'm sure you have too. But would you like to start and talk a little bit about maybe, your own personal experience with intermittent fasting?
Yeah. I think the cool thing about this conversation is like you and I were saying, it's like we're digging into like all this research and we're learning and we're like educating ourselves over and over. And I feel like as coaches, it's very important that we are continuously growing
Yes.
and learning. And we're never at this point to where I know it all and this is what it is, but you're constantly digging in and finding credible keyword research. And so I will say my personal experience, first of all, I like to eat.
Me too.
I like to eat. Let's just put that there. I'm a foodie. I love to eat. And so intermittent fasting has never been my best friend. Um, we'll just say that. But you hear all the things like you should do this. And so I've definitely incorporated it. And I've kind of switched how I do it now, but I incorporated it because initially I didn't really eat breakfast a lot just because of my schedule and I'm always on the go. So I'll share one story with you real quick. So I didn't eat breakfast while I was doing intermittent fasting, quote unquote, and I was like, I'm just gonna go for a walk. So I kind of went on a walk fasted, which was okay. But then I've decided in my walk, I'm gonna sprint. I'm gonna go as hard as I can. And girl, I had no energy. I was like, oh my God, I was exhausted. It was very hard for me to like just get myself going. And I was like, immediately in my mind, I was like, Jamila, you don't have enough fuel. You just don't have enough fuel to do this. And so when I came home, I was so tired, like unexplainable tired, like very exhausted, fatigued. I barely really did anything, but I was trying to push myself and I didn't have any fuel. And so I know I tell a lot of my clients, If you don't, think about a car, right? If your car doesn't have enough gas, it's not going to cooperate like it should. And it's the same with us. If we don't have enough gas or fuel or nutrition, it's going to be very hard to do what we need to do. So I kind of looked at that prior to kind of doing all this research, like, Jamila, you need to fuel your body before you try to do this strenuous exercise. So my experience has just been, it's very difficult for me to push myself hard if I don't have any fuel in my body.
Yeah.
Um, that's a little bit of an experience I've had with intermittent fasting, but tell me, I know you've had lots of experiences with it. So tell me a little bit more about some of your experiences that you've experienced with intermittent fasting.
Sure. I am a human guinea pig. I love testing everything on my body. And sometimes it's not great, but that's just what I like to do. And intermittent fasting has been part of my journey, especially when I got committed to health and fitness religiously exactly 10 years ago. That's when I got into CrossFit. That's when I started working out consistently at least 5 days a week, more like 6 or 7 times a week on some weeks.
Right.
And I was also so I was getting strong, my body was changing, I had all these fun goals about losing fat, gaining muscle, and I was just all about human optimization, and I was listening to everything and reading everything that was related to that.
Yeah.
I also it's funny. Now that I'm saying it out loud, I really got into intermittent fasting when I started booking my first fitness jobs. When I
Mm.
started booking my first fitness modeling jobs. Man, there's a
Right.
lot of pressure there. And especially if you're not used to that, you might feel insecure. I know that I did. Didn't matter how I looked and it didn't matter how people perceived me, but I just wanted to make sure that I was on point and I could deliver and I looked the part.
Yeah.
And so I experimented with intermittent fasting because I had heard so many good things and I heard it was a very helpful strategy for some individuals.
Yeah.
And I did it for years. I did it for at least 2 years, but I've done it off and on over the past 10 years for good chunks of time, several months at a time. And I can tell you this, in my 30s, this is also key. I did it in my mid to late 30s. So
Yeah.
in a way, I could get away with it back then. It
Mm.
worked for me. And PS, I also like to eat. And I was consuming 2,500 calories a day on average, sometimes more. And I was very proud of the fact that I could do that and still be fit. But here's the thing about intermittent fasting. I ate in a window from like 11 a.m. I would have my first meal and I would cut off all food around 6 p.m. So it's not a very big window. That's 7 hours. I'm allowed to feed myself and take in any calories. And it worked again in my late 30s, but I'm telling you, now that I'm closer to my mid 40s,
Yeah.
I don't like it. My body doesn't like it. I cannot hit the kind of strength gains that I want. PS, when I was in my 30s, yes, it did work. And yes, I was able to stay a certain size. I was able to stay lean and small. But girl, I'm telling you, I could not put on any muscle. And I was so frustrated. I would be
Yeah.
working out next to other people, and I'm like, how can they lift so much more than me? I'm working just as hard as them. And the thing
Yeah.
was, the truth of it was I was overtraining and I
Mm.
was under eating. Even though I was consuming 2,500, sometimes 3,000 calories, I needed more and I needed more rest. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Yes. That's good. And I love the fact that you're pointing out the fact about muscle mass, because I think I would just say from what I've learned from my clients, more so who are hardcore intermittent fasters. One of them specifically I have in mind, she was not only intermittent fasting, but she was also hardcore doing like HIIT workouts.
Mm,
And she, why am I not losing any weight? She was like, I'm working out 6 days a week. I'm doing intermittent fasting, but mostly for a calorie deficit. That was her strategy.
sure.
And, you know, I said, I think you're putting too much stress on your body. And so also a lot of times, like you said, we have to experiment a lot to figure out what's really going on. So I told her, you kind of have to go through an experiment, honestly, because everybody's so different. There's no one size fits all. But I encouraged her to cut down her HIIT workouts because she was doing them 6 days a week, every single day. And I said I encouraged her to cut down her HIIT workouts and to stop intermittent fasting because she was working out, so she needed more fuel for her body. Um, and I said, I would rather you front load your meals. So eat your breakfast because you're working out in the morning. And then if you want to do intermittent fasting, I don't know why I do that, but if you want to do intermittent fasting, then you can cut it off late. I'm sorry, cut it off earlier. So have your dinner like 5 or 6 o'clock, and then you're gonna fast as you sleep and the rest of that night. So, anyways, that's what she did. And then the weight started coming. It didn't happen immediately, but I would say within 3 weeks, finally her weight started coming down. And she was like, "What? This is crazy."
Mm,
And I'm like, that's the thing. We don't realize we're putting this stress on our body. And I didn't know at the time that intermittent fasting was putting stress on the body either. I'm just
right.
kind of learning that now. I was more
Yes.
about the exercise was putting stress on the body, and the fact that she didn't have enough calories was putting stress on the body. So I didn't connect the dots necessarily. But now, as I look back, that's what it was doing. She had too much stress,
Yes.
and so I think it's interesting. We have to experiment sometimes, but yes, I think you have to be very intentional and very much aware and in tune with your body when you go through these things that so many people are like, you should do that. This is
Yes.
absolutely amazing. Intermittent fasting is like the fad thing to do. I do this a lot, just ignore that. But that's the fad. That's the fad thing to do. And so everybody's on board. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people are on board with it without the research and without understanding what it's doing to their body. So, with all that being said, I think that's really key. Muscle mass too is a big thing that I've learned as we've kind of been researching, that a lot of people are realizing they're losing muscle mass, especially if you're doing it every single day, or even the longer fast, the 2 3 day fast. People are losing a lot of muscle mass as well.
They
So
are. And I can speak from experience. And you can't go by like looking at what somebody looks like from the exterior. For the most part, I was very healthy, but I had goals. Like I wanted to be able to lift heavier. I wanted to be able to put on some more lean mass. And it was extremely difficult because, like your client, I was putting a lot of stress on my body. And, I'm not going to be hard on myself for that period because I needed to learn. And apparently that's how I needed to learn. But I know better now. And like we're gaining more research as health coaches. It's our responsibility to stay on top of all of the research and to gain more sources, like Dr. Stacy Sims, for example. I just listened to her on the Huberman podcast, and I was
yeah,
just blown away, not only by some of the things that she shared about intermittent fasting, but she's just so adamant about like not intermittent fasting, especially if you train and especially if you're a woman. So
yeah.
she specializes, if you haven't heard this podcast, Dr. Stacy Sims is an exercise physiologist. She has her PhD from Stanford, and her training is specifically in health, performance, and longevity, and she specializes in endurance athletes, particularly women. And so this really spoke to me because I'm an active woman, and like you, we're trying to train people to be more active. I'm not sure if the people listening to this are going to be more sedentary, but this will also be helpful for them because I think our goal is to try and get people up and moving more.
Yes.
And if you're going to do that, and if you happen to be a woman who's in her 40s or even in her 30s, you might consider not fasting. Big takeaway I want to make sure that's mentioned. It doesn't mean you need to eat a big ass meal before you work out, right?
Right.
It's you need some calories, you need some protein, and depending on the type of workout you want to do, you might need some carbohydrate. And
Yeah.
when I say some, I'm talking like 15 grams, which feels like nothing. It's like a scoop of protein powder. For me, what that looks like is in my hot tea, I'm doing 1 scoop of collagen protein powder, which is 19 grams. And then I mix in a little bit of like maca root powder, which is great for energy. And, I work out. And P.S., you should be doing this, I suppose, within 30 minutes of working out. And then what's equally important, if not more, is making sure to get in additional protein and complex carbohydrates post workout, within an hour, ideally 45 minutes. But it's not like there's no hard lines on this, but just get it in. Don't be waiting 2 hours because you
Yeah.
need that recovery. You need to use that fuel. And that's typically, Dr. Sims was saying, that's when um, you want to do that within an hour of working out. And yeah. So
Mhm.
were you going to say something? I feel like
No, I love that.
you
I
have thoughts.
No, I think that's so important to share so people know and the importance, like even when like complex carbs, for example, for those who may not know what that is, I know I've worked with some people who are like, well, what's carbs? Because when I think of carbs, I'm like, so that means I can't eat, baked foods. And it's like, I want you to focus on nature's carbs, basically, just things that come from nature. That's like your complex carbs, your vegetables, and if at all possible, um, lower glycemic fruits, not the
Hmm.
high sugar fruits that we all love. Um, but I think it's
Root
important.
vegetables.
Yes, yes, the yummy, 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 yummy. But yeah, I think it's important that people understand the importance of, especially before having a little bit, like you said, it doesn't have to be a full meal. Because I think when I was kind of doing some research on it, I was like, I don't have time to eat a full meal first thing in the
Right.
morning. People are so busy, they're running out of the door. And so there's still ways, like you said, putting a little bit of protein powder in your tea to start your day. It's something to get the fuel in your body that you need so you can do that workout. And then again, like you said, having something afterwards for the recovery, which is really, really important. The recovery is important. I think people underestimate the power of recovery. So yeah, I was just gonna totally agree with you. And I think it's important that people take advantage. And if you want to be active, which, like you said, our goal is for people to get up and not be sedentary, to move your body, to live an active lifestyle. So it's important that you kind of shift your mindset from what you may have learned a lot about intermittent fasting or don't eat before or don't eat breakfast anymore um, because you really need that fuel to get your body to be in the right state that it needs to be in. Um,
Yeah. When you first wake up, within 30 minutes of waking up, cortisol peaks in the body. And
yes.
so that's your stress hormone. And cortisol can be good. It can be very useful. You need it to be productive and to get moving and to do the things. But
Mhm.
also, you don't want that stress to stay high. You need to bring it back down because when stress is high, when cortisol is high in the body for long periods of time, then we're looking at, a cascade of detrimental effects, metabolic health disease of all different types, and just general stress, that just prevents us from living healthy, balanced lives.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so one point I think is really important to make is I don't want this conversation to be about like how intermittent fasting doesn't work and it's just detrimental to people's health and don't do it. That's not what I think we're saying at all. I think what we're saying is, number one, you need to listen to your body,
Yes.
and number two, you need to go out and get your research. You can listen to some of these podcasts, and what we can do is we can make all of these different podcasts available. And P.S., there's a lot of different people out there with a lot of different opinions. This conversation, we should tell people this conversation was sparked by Jamila giving me um, information on, I'm not going to say doctor, Mindy Sims. She's a
Mm.
chiropractor, and it's not that I don't
Mindy.
think highly. Mindy Pelz, my bad. I just combined the two. Mindy Pelz, Pelz. She puts doctor in front of her name, and she is a chiropractor, and I don't recognize that as a doctor. And so I may lose some people there, but that's just my opinion. And she wrote a book called Fast Like a Girl. And so I listened to one of her most recent podcasts on, I believe it was The School of Greatness with Lewis Howes. I think that's his name. And she's just all about it. But she's also saying that you need to pay attention to you need to fast in accordance with a woman's cycle, menstrual cycle. And so, if that's something that interests you, I encourage you to dive in deeper into what her experience, her personal experience, and the experiences of her clients have had. Now, Dr. Stacy Sims, on the other hand, is she's an endurance athlete herself, or she was, and she works with athletes, and her background is in science. And, she, like I said in the beginning of this, she's an exercise physiologist. I literally wrote this down because I thought saying her credentials was really important. She's a nutrition scientist.
Mhm.
And um, this is the one thing, all of that to say, women who are peri or postmenopausal
Mhm.
and are overweight or obese, who intermittent fast, or have PCOS, which is
Yes.
polycystic ovary syndrome, or some other kind of subclinical issue, they might benefit from intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to note that. But that's different from most active women who don't have those other issues.
Yeah. That's such a great point and a great disclaimer. Because I think intermittent fasting, especially if you're sedentary and you're obese, can be a strategy if you're very intentional. Because what I have found too is some people who do intermittent fasting and they think it's intentional, within that window of eating, they're eating crap. And that's not,
Mm, interesting.
you can't eat crap during the window that's open. You need to still eat quality foods and make sure that you're getting the complex carbs, like you were saying, Kat, the protein, the healthy fats, the fiber. Um, so I think it's important to make sure if you're going to take advantage of intermittent fasting, you are obese, you want to jumpstart, be very, very intentional. And I think another side note to say is if you ever had an eating disorder, intermittent fasting is not for you.
That's a
Like,
really good point.
yeah, I don't think anybody who had any type of eating disorder should do fasting, intermittent fasting, or anything because I think it could be a very dangerous trigger. But yes, I totally agree. Like if you have any type of PCOS, or if your doctor is like, you need to do intermittent fasting, well, then you need to listen to your doctor. Don't
Always,
don't
always.
don't come for us like, well, I was watching Kat and Jamila and yeah. So so I think there are strategies where intermittent fasting can be beneficial. Um, but again, just from my experience and what I've seen from my clients who are getting active, and even those who are overweight right now, but they're getting into a routine and they're actively doing something every single day. Um, I encourage them, if anything, to front load. Like we said, eat your breakfast. And if you want to do intermittent fasting, then just cut your dinner off early because as you sleep, you're still going to get the fasting in, you're still going to get that
Mhm.
recovery and all the benefits. But you need to have some fuel to start your day, especially if you're a more active person at this point. So,
Yeah.
great points.
I feel like where I'm at in my life, I'm very active, but I'm not going for PRs. I'm not lifting ridiculously heavy the way that I was in my 30s.
Yeah.
Um, and that's just because of a personal choice, and that may change, and that's the beauty of, like, being on a fitness journey is you can have different challenges depending on what's going on in your life. But for right now, I am it's all about, like, slow progress and taking care of myself for, like, longevity, and intermittent fasting is not a part of that right now. Um, and I'll tell you, it's because it is an added stress that's unnecessary for me. And this is making me think of another point that Dr. Sims was talking about, because she's had people ask her, well, wait a minute, I do intermittent fasting and it works really, really well. And
Mhm.
her response to that is, how much better would you be if you were paying attention to your circadian rhythm and fueling your body according to the stress at hand, knowing that you're going to garner less stress that way? She
Mhm.
says what she's saying is, maybe you feel great doing intermittent fasting, but maybe you would feel even better if you did just get that. If you broke that fast, you got that little bit of high quality nutrition in, and then you went for your PR, or then you went for, you know, whatever it is that you're trying to achieve in your health and fitness. So I
Yeah.
think that's a really interesting point, because I don't take anything back from what I did in my 30s as far as fitness and nutrition and experimentation was concerned.
Yeah.
I enjoyed all of it and I learned so much from it, but it would be really interesting to go back in time and to
Mm.
have fueled myself a little bit differently and
Mhm.
see if I could have gotten some gains that, I didn't exactly get.
Yeah.
Um, which leads to a whole different conversation. And now I'm just thinking into the future, like the way
Yeah.
that women like to be perceived. We want to be fit, but we want to be lean. We don't want to be too bulky, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And that's a whole different conversation. But to bring it back to intermittent fasting, if one of my clients wants to experiment with it, I definitely say, you know what? It's 100% your choice. I'm just going to present you with what I know, the
Yeah.
current research, and what I'm doing personally for where I'm at. I am not doing it.
Mhm.
Um, and at the same time, if I'm not hungry, I'm not going to force myself to eat.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not going to force myself to eat. And if I am hungry and my stomach's growling at 8 a.m. and I'm more used to eating like at around like 9 or 10, then I'm going to eat earlier. So it all boils down to, I've got to pay more attention to what my body is asking for.
Yes. That's it. Being in tune, being very in tune, listening. And I feel like a lot of people, I say this all the time, are waiting for their body to scream at them before they listen. And sometimes it takes some time to listen because we've been so used to having a routine and we are doing things based on, like 12 o'clock, I eat lunch, but am I really hungry? Or am I just doing that because every day at 12 o'clock I eat lunch? So sometimes
Mm,
I've gotten into a system of not listening to their body. And so I think it is very, very important to really become in tune, listen, reflect, take some time to experiment a little bit. I think that's okay because, again, there's no one size fits all. And what one person's experience may be, may not be the next person's experience, right? But so many people just do not know how to listen. And I think that's really, really the key. Um, but on top of that, I do think it's really important to get blood work. Like I'm definitely an advocate for that,
100%. Yes.
you know? Because sometimes you could think you're listening and you're like, I feel really good, but you don't have a clue what's really going on internally. And so I think having routine blood work is really, really important also. So you can get a better idea of what your biomarkers, what is really going on inside your body. Um, and sometimes you could connect the dots. Let's say, for example, somebody is a hardcore faster, um, and they notice, and I'm just throwing this out here, and they notice that, wow, my hormone levels are not suboptimal anymore. Things have changed. Then there's some things to say about that. Maybe you need to connect the dots or investigate a little bit further. So blood work is really important so that you can see deeper, on
Yes.
what's in the body. for sure.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that, and I think that's one of the things that attracts me to Life Force so much is because, number 1, the phlebotomist comes to my house, so I don't have to go anywhere, and number
Right.
2, I'm getting my blood work done every 3 months, and so it's like I have a 3-month, challenge at hand because based on those numbers, I know where I need work, and how am I gonna know otherwise? I can't just look at myself in the mirror and say, "Oh, your vitamin D must be low,"
Yeah.
because my vitamin D was low, and it's like you can't tell by just looking at someone. There
Right.
are some signs and symptoms, but they vary from individual to individual. And
Right.
there's and but the blood work tells like a lot of different things. And so I 100% back you in that. People need to get regular blood work done. People need to listen to their bodies more. And I love how you said that the body will sometimes scream at you. And it's like, let's not get to that point. If we can avoid it, if at all possible, let's listen to it when it starts talking to us, or maybe when we get really good, when it starts whispering. Like, it's like, hey,
Mm.
you know, I know you've been doing stuff this way, but I'm really hungry. Why don't you just give me a little something? And then
Right.
the negotiation there is like, hey, why don't we just find like a small something with a little bit of protein, maybe a little bit of complex carbohydrate, and try that as opposed to having like the big meal. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing situation. We can make gradual changes and tweak. That's the beauty, I
Yeah.
think, of being on a health and fitness journey.
Yes.
My journey has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. How I train is very, very different now than how I used to train, and how I eat is very different as well.
Yes.
And I think depending on what's going on in your life, how old you are, your gender, the amount of stress you have, and what you're able to do
Mm.
is it all that all depends, because we're giving out a lot of good information. There's a lot of great resources out there, but most people are just trying to survive and trying to take care of their families, trying to earn a living and
Yeah.
juggle all of these different things. And it's like they might not have the bandwidth to slow down as much as we'd encourage them to. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have to meet people where they are. And
Yes, I love that.
yes, and I love what you're saying, like, depending on the season of life that you're in too, because your season, I mean, I know 15 years ago, when I had lots of little kids running around, that was completely different season than now, where I have 3 kids who are young adults, versus 5 kids who are young running around. And so I think we have to recognize you're right. It's about gradual change. It's about making progress, not perfection.
Mm.
Um, and if you can only take walks and you're not into, weight training and all that stuff, that's okay. Like, start where you can and then gradually start building from there. And I like what you were saying, how your fitness regimen has changed over the years. I know for me, like in my 20s and 30s, kind of like even what Dr. Sims was saying, like she called this like walking was like was it, what did she say, your soul? Um,
Oh, her long bike rides are like therapy for her soul.
Therapy for her soul. Yeah. Yeah. And so I love a nature walk, right? Like going out, and I did that a lot in my 20s and 30s. And I lost weight doing it also. Like
Mm.
I lost weight just doing long walks. It was nothing strenuous really about it. It was just taking walks, and maybe I would pick up the pace a little bit here and there. But now, like you, in my mid 40s, that's not working quite like it used to.
Yeah, it's funny because I really remember that part of the podcast that Dr. Sims was on, and she was saying there it's not that that stuff can't happen. Like she loves her long bike rides. I'm like you, I love a long walk, and I will still do them no matter if I'm losing weight or not, because it's not about that. It's
Yeah.
about it's about clearing this, and it's about getting that nice dose of vitamin D if the sun happens to be out. And it's about relaxation, and it's about just moving, because being sedentary, like, there's just too many opportunities in today's society for us to just be, sedentary. Even though we're talking about health and fitness, like, I don't know about you, but I'm sitting on a couch right now. I'm
Yeah.
not on a little walking treadmill or anything. And so for me, I've designed my life to be active by going out and seeing my clients and going out and being in the world and moving my body, because that holds me accountable. Otherwise, I don't know where I would be.
Yeah.
I've had desk jobs before, and they were
Mm.
miserable and terrible. But if you don't mind, there's another thing I want to share with you, since we have that life force connection, and just for you out there who don't know what life force is, Jamila, can you give a brief understanding of what life force offers?
Yeah. Life Force is uh, a longevity partner, a longevity team. And basically, like Kat was saying, you do blood work every quarter, every 3 months. So you do your initial blood work, you get it's over 40 biomarkers from critical nutrients to your hormones to metabolic health. Um, so many different biomarkers that most people cannot get. Well, you could, but it's not as easy to get these biomarkers from your traditional doctor. And so once you do the biomarkers, you meet with a clinician and they go over the biomarkers in depth, like tell you the things that you need to really focus on, what lifestyle changes you can make, and sometimes medication, depending on what it is. And then from there, you also connect with the health coach. So you have a clinician that you partner with, you have a health coach that you partner with. And the whole goal is to ensure that you are improving those biomarkers every quarter. So if it's through lifestyle changes, healthy habits, your nutrition, fitness, then the goal is that you're working together with your health coach to improve those things. So when you get your next blood work, you're seeing change. In my experiences, it's been so amazing to be able to see change even with Kat. Just biomarkers improving every quarter. And that is the key longevity and true longevity, right? Like you're internally making things happen in your body. So yeah, that's a little snippet of what Life Force is.
Thank you. And the reason why I wanted you to share all that is because I figured I would share with you what my life force clinician recommended for me personally. I don't mind sharing. So, this is their recommendation on intermittent fasting.
Hmm.
So, the clinician said, go with your gut on this one, probably pun intended. Since
Yeah.
you are very active and require very precise nutrition and caloric intake, fasting for too long may or may not be right for you. Research has shown that intermittent fasting can be very beneficial to your health. There are many different types of fasting. One of the most common and easiest fasting methods is the 16-8, which means 16 hours of fasting and then 8 hours eating window.
Mhm.
Studies show that intermittent fasting can improve your sugar control, increase human growth hormone, which will improve your energy,
Mhm.
promote cellular repair, and increase BDNF, which stands for brain derived neurotropic factor. It's a protein that helps nerve cells survive in the brain and spinal cord. So,
Mhm.
you can start slowly with a 12-hour overnight fast, then work your way up to 16. And what I read from that is give it a try. If it doesn't work, don't do it. If it does work, keep it going. That's what I read.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what I've been doing. I feel like that's a safe answer, but it's a very honest answer.
Yeah.
And when I read about it can improve your sugar control, I like this because if you think about it, depending on the size of your eating window, if it's a smaller eating window, I remember
Yeah.
one of my clients was saying it's really, really hard to get in the amount of calories I need to get in for the day because I just can't eat that much in that small of a period. And I listened to that and I was like, wow, that makes sense. It's not true for me. I can eat like an animal, but for her, she couldn't do that. So she ended up being in a deficit
Yeah.
because she simply couldn't get in all of the food during that window. And
Yeah.
so in her case, her weight did go down.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to share that thing about what people are recommending, what my life force clinician had recommended, and yeah.
I love that. I think that is a safe answer. And I think, again, it kind of comes back down to you know your body. I think it's okay to experiment if you need to. And then here's another thing. As I was like kind of digging in and trying to do as much research as I could these past few weeks, just in intermittent fasting, there's not a lot of research.
No, there's not.
Like, there's really not. And so a lot of the research I was finding was on rats and mice. And while I know that's what most people use for research, there's not a lot of human studies. I mean, there's some out there, but a lot of them I saw were like 8 weeks, 12 weeks. So it's just hard to say, honestly, because we don't have a lot of research on it, on what it really can do. But again, I think, like we've been saying kind of throughout this, is listen to your body, take advantage of blood work, um, pay attention to muscle mass. If you're really, really intermittent fasting and you're doing it hardcore, and I mean, not just intermittent fasting, also doing longer fasts, 2, 3 days. And this is a part of your routine, like you're doing this once a month. I think it's really important to pay attention to muscle mass. They have those scales where you can, look at your skeletal muscle, and you can look at how, if it improves or declines over time. So I would really encourage people who are really doing intermittent fasting or fasting in general to pay attention. If you're wanting to gain muscle, I think that, if anything, a lot of people's personal experiences with fasting, that's what they found, was a loss in muscle mass over time. So I think that's just one key to really be mindful of as you go through your journey. Yeah.
Another thing that they're finding that Dr. Sims enlightened me with is some of the research is showing that folks who are waiting till 11, 12 o'clock and then eat, stopping their eating window around 6, 7, or 5 or 6, um, these folks they're seeing obesogenic effects.
Mm,
Yeah, and so that's a whole other discussion that would require me to dig deeper into that, but I think what we need to do is link people to some of the podcasts that we've been watching and listening to, and just know that intermittent fasting may or may not work. I think that and I think this is the last thing I'm gonna say on it, is if you have PCOS, if you're living a sedentary lifestyle, if you're obese, if you're a woman that's peri or postmenopausal, you should dig a lot deeper into the research and consider um, intermittent fasting. But as Jamila had said earlier, this is something you're going to need to see your clinician about. You need to see your doctor about that.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great point. So give me a second. I just read some research about PCOS that I thought was really good, and I'll share it. Well, let's see. I should have had it pulled up if I can find it. Um, but to your point, I think that that's one of the underlying conditions that, from the research that has been done, where fasting can be beneficial. Um, so let me read this real quick. So it says, this is just based off of one trial. It says, to date, only one trial has measured the effects of meal timing on estradiol levels in women. Okay. Um, Compared to the effect of eating greater than 50% of calories at dinner versus eating greater than 50% of calories at breakfast in females with PCOS. After 12 weeks, estradiol significantly increased among females with PCOS when participants ate greater than 50% of daily calories at dinner. This result suggests that eating a large amount of food later in the day may augment estrogen levels in women with PCOS, which is what you don't want. Elevated serum androgens are converted to estrogens, leading to excess estrogen production in females with PCOS and obesity. Okay, and then taken together, shifting calorie intake to earlier in the day may be preferred for females with PCOS to avoid further increases in estrogen levels. So hopefully that made sense. But in a nutshell, based on this one study, it could be beneficial if you have PCOS, because again, PCOS, that's high levels of estrogen that's running through the female body, which is what's causing the problem. And they're saying if you front load, basically eat your breakfast, they found greater results with people to decrease the estrogen levels versus if they had a lot of calories later in the day. So, and I
That's
can,
Yeah, that's something I need to do a lot more research on because I'm only discovering PCOS now, and it's um it's mind-blowing how many women actually are living with this condition. I
yeah,
believe I believe it's like 1 in 10. It's pretty high.
yeah,
I have some clients with it, and I'm just learning about it now and trying to dig deeper because their requirements for nutrition is going to be vastly different than what I would recommend or suggest to clients who do not have that.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we'll make sure we post this link so, if anybody's interested in looking into it. But I thought that was just good to put out there because, again, like we said, it's like you were pointing out, it's different for everybody. Um, Experimenting is okay, but really be mindful and be in tune with your body and um, pay attention. Don't let your body
Yes.
scream. I like what you said. If we can just listen to the whispers, right, and become very proactive and do what we need for ourselves and our body, that is such a form of self-respect and self-love. Um, and we'll be really fortunate when we become even older and older because we're being proactive now, no matter where you are. If you can just stop and be proactive now, I think there's so many benefits to that in itself.
Yeah. Prevention is the key. It's much easier to to set people up for success
Yeah.
in having high quality of life, because longevity means high quality of life, right? We don't want to just live longer. We want to live longer, but live at a high quality and be able
Yeah.
to move and be able to take care of ourselves and not have to rely on others, not be limited in our mobility, etc. And yeah, I love that. One last thing I did want to say because we didn't mention it yet, but intermittent fasting for women seeking to get pregnant. Um, I It might seem like a no-brainer, but I think it's worth mentioning that probably not a great idea because women don't need to women who are trying to be pregnant or get pregnant rather, they're not they don't need any extra stress.
Yeah.
They don't need any extra stress at all. And intermittent fasting is essentially putting stress on the body. And so I just want to say that. And that's definitely that, women who are seeking to get pregnant, they can talk more with their gynecologist, with their family doctor about that. But
Absolutely.
was there any last thoughts that you had, Jamila, before we wrap up?
The one last thing that just popped in my mind is it's something kind of like not like PCOS, but an underlying condition that's important to pay attention to is insulin resistance.
Mm,
So that's another thing, and it's a metabolic condition. If there's any form of insulin resistance, there have been some studies where intermittent fasting can be beneficial in those cases as well. Um, but again, it's worth. I hope out of this conversation that people dig in and do research, really pay attention to credible sources. We can't just do a Google search and whatever pops up is the answer. I hope that people really dig in and do some research. And if you've been feeling very tired and fatigued in any way, and you are somebody who fasts, it's worth considering, is there a connection? Now, obviously, you're going to be tired if you're just starting intermittent fasting, right? Like the first day, you're probably going to feel low energy. But if it's something that you've been doing consistently as a routine and you're just like, I don't have energy anymore, or you feel changes, there may be a connection. But I hope that people really dig in and do some research and learn, listen to their body, experiment if they need to. I hope that's what people can get from this, and live and move your body every day. I think that's
I love all of that. And I'll just reiterate one more time. As a woman in her 40s, as an active woman in her 40s, I am not intermittent fasting.
yeah. Come on now, because help. We need the fuel. We need the fuel to get
I
going.
need this. I need the fuel, and it makes a world of difference. And like side note, I'm not on caffeine anymore, which is a whole different animal.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm relying on just natural energy, and I that could be for like possibly a different discussion if people are interested in what it's like to fuel naturally as opposed to taking all these different things. But I feel like my body can speak to me, and I can really hear it more easily when I don't have caffeine in me.
Yeah. And as you say that, if people may not realize, caffeine can spike cortisol. I mean,
And it does. It
yeah,
can and it does.
yeah,
It
yeah,
does. And I'm not trying to have my sympathetic nervous system even more up here. I'm telling you, I got to give you, I just have to share this, but
yeah.
I am less stressed. I am
Mm,
less stressed overall. My heart is not, beating as fast as soon as I take in that yerba mate. I don't even drink coffee. I was
yeah,
drinking multiple cups of yerba mate, maybe black tea, but it's just, I'm sensitive to caffeine. And, PS, like people metabolize caffeine differently. So some
right,
people are sensitive to it. Some people, it has no effect on them whatsoever. But
right.
again, that can be for another
I know.
discussion.
Another day, but that's a good point. And I'll say this, I'm caffeine sensitive, and I try to drink caffeine, well, coffee, because it smells so good. I mean, it does smell good.
I
So
like the smell of coffee too.
right. I used to like drink it just because it was like it smells good and it tastes good. And man, let me tell y'all, after the first cup, you could tell I had coffee because I'm like, hey, hey, like I was so hyped up, and then my heart's beating fast. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I cannot, like, I personally cannot do caffeine. Definitely coffee. Maybe I can do lighter, like decaf on occasion, but I completely agree. It's important. Well, that's another story. But anyways, it's important to, because yes, cortisol levels definitely spike when you drink coffee, and it can impact your journey. If you're on a journey of losing weight, I have noticed people who have the cortisol spikes, it can interfere with their journey. From my personal clients that I've experienced who are caffeine drinkers, I always tell them, if you're drinking 4 cups, let's get down to one. If you're drinking
Yeah.
one, get down to half, and let's eventually get down to zero, so your body can come off of get the natural energy. And side note, 10 minutes of walking, research has shown, is equivalent to 1 cup of coffee for energy. So sometimes we just got to get there and move our body. So
I feel like we could go on and just keep going. Side note, side note, side
no,
note. Now, because now I really want to dive deep into caffeine.
I know. P.S. Side note, I know we're gonna have to do another one of these, because I I knew it was going to be a great conversation. We always have good conversation off camera. Um, and so I'm so glad that we did this.
Yes,
Um,
me too. I'm really thankful. And you being a mom of five, and I still like I just can't believe it. Like I've seen the pictures of your kids, so I know it's true. You're not making it up. But you're phenomenal. The energy is great. You look amazing. You are amazing, and I'm literally in awe of you.
oh, girl. No, I really, really appreciate that. That's so encouraging to hear. And I feel the same about you. I know you're not a mom of five, but I feel the same about you. I'm totally inspired. You've encouraged me to do my pull-ups, so thank you for that, because
Ooh, you're welcome.
let me tell you, I was struggling on just I had 10 down and then I lost it. And so thank you. You're always so encouraging and I love you. And I'm so glad. And we're going to be
I
more and
love
more.
you too.